Hey everybody, Scout Crafter here again. It's Monday, Mish Mosh Monday. We got a lot to talk about, a lot to do today. Beautiful day out. Let's go check out something real quick and to start off the show.
Now take a look at this flower. Can you identify it? Have you ever seen this before? I'll give you an answer at the end of the show.
Okay, welcome back to the shop. We have a really good mosh today. Couple things to talk about. First thing, let's talk about, I'm glad you enjoyed the Vice video. But I had a couple questions about the pinning process, so I thought we'd go through that. Pinning is a great thing to use and to keep in your bag of tricks, so to speak. So let's talk. My first introduction to pinning was from Mr. Wexler, was an old scout leader of mine, and we were heading up to a camp. And we stopped by an old Amish barn that was abandoned, and he took us in there and showed us some of the joint work and some of the pinning that was involved. And he told us some interesting things about pinning, which I to this day I think is amazing.
The first thing you're going to do is whatever pin you're going to use, whether it's a dowel or a metal dowel or a pin, a nail, anything you're going to do, the first thing you have to do is you have to make sure the accurate size is accurate for the drill. So you take your piece of scrap, you know, you always have these laying around, and you see you drill one hole, this is too small, it won't fit in. You drill another hole, this is too big, you see there's too much slop. And then you get the exact right drill, and it should fit in just like this. No slop and very tight. And that's the drill that you're going to use for your pinning.
Now, here's just an example of a pinning of, let's say, 2 pieces of wood. But again, any objects can be pinned. Now, what's interesting is the Amish, what they used to do, or any of the old barn builders, is, you know, when we use wood, the wood has to be dried down to anywhere between like 6 and 12%, depending on what you're using it for. But those big beams, a lot of times they were like, you know, 15%, because the beams were so thick, they might be dry on the outside, but they were always a little bit wet on the inside. So, and they knew that, there would be shrinkage. So the brilliant people that they were, what they did was, they took the wood that was a little bit on the moist side, and they made sure that their pins were super dry, okay? Now, these were like, you know, 4 to 5%, really dry, and meaning they're not going to shrink anymore. So when they pinned these 2 pieces in like this, now here we have our 2 pieces of wood just pinned in. Now, you could see the joint is nice, and you can see it's solid now, and that's just the pin because it's a kind of a friction fit in there. So there's no glue or anything. But what was so genius about them is they knew that the thicker wood would shrink and this wouldn't. So when this shrunk, it would shrink around the hardwood dowel, and that would create a joint that was almost impossible to get out. In fact, if you had to get these apart, you had to cut it along the seam because you weren't getting that dowel out of there. And when you pin something like this, now once you're pinned, if you were gluing it or something, then you could just cut off the top of the
Okay, another cool thing you could do with pinning, and please don't take this as an example of my joinery. I just did this real quick.
Now, let's say you wanted to join these 2 pieces here like this, and you wanted to join it with a pin like this. Now, you would think that once you put it together, you would just drill a hole, but that might leave a little bit of a gap here, and you want it to be real tight. So what they would do, the old timers figured out that, and the timber framers are probably laughing now because this is something that's common knowledge to them. But you see here, we circle that hole. Now, the center of the hole would be a little bit left of here. But you see, we're going to drill a little bit right, because what happens is when we offset that hole a 16th or 1/8 of an inch, depending on what kind of beam you're using, when you offset that hole to the right, it's going to, when you pull the pin in, it's going to draw the 2 together. So that's really interesting.
You can see we drilled that hole, and it doesn't, there's just a little bit. You could see here it's not completely centered, you see? It looks like it's off a little bit, but that's on purpose, because now when we drive that pin through, it'll pull this joint really tight together, and that's what they did years ago to keep the joints tight and snug. Okay, you can see we pinned there, it drew it in, it's nice and tight, and you can see there's no wiggle room at all, you know, and that's one way you can use a pin to draw an item.
The pin we did on the vise was a metal pin, and there are different types. There are pins just to stop something from backing out or threading out, not too much pressure. This vise handle could have a lot of pressure on it. So let me show you what kind of pin I use.
Now here's my selection of pins and dowels and music wire. I keep everything up here kind of tucked away in up in the rafters, so to speak. So let me pull out a couple. For pinning, especially in metal, you can use if it's something that's non-stress, that's not something that's going to like the vise was something that was high stress. If it's something that's non-stress, you can use a nail. A nail makes a perfect pin. You just, you cut off the tip, the head, the tip, and you got a perfect pin. You can even use threaded rod. You can drill a hole, you could thread through it, and you could spin this in. That makes a good pin. Again, this is regular mild steel. Here is a mild steel bar. These come in all different sizes, but and here's aluminum. You could see difference. You can see by looking at it. This is aluminum. Again, not for high strength or high stress areas. Brass. A lot of people use brass pins. Very good, easy to work with, easy to cut, not very strong. But this is music wire. Music wire. Or they use this for making springs, but this is high tempered steel, and you could tell this because you can't cut this with like a hacksaw. If you try and cut it with a hacksaw, your hacksaw will just skid all over the top. It is super hard. It's like a hardened bolt. So how do you cut something like this? To cut regular brass or regular steel, this is one of my all-time top 10 favorite tools. There's a homemade, machinist-made rod shear, and you can see how it works. It's 2 pieces of steel. He drilled a series of holes in here, and you see what happens. It shears it. So you would take the nail, you put it in the appropriate hole, and you would turn it. This fits in your vise. Let me show you how cool this works. Now to use this device, you just take it like this, and again, these rails fit right here on the jaws. Put it in your great-grandfather's vise, give it a little snug, and then you take your rod, you put it in the appropriate hole. The one that fits snug, this one here won't fit. This one here is the closest one that'll fit. And then once you have it in here where you want to cut it, you just give a yank on this handle, and that's how quick and easy. And look at the beautiful cut, the straight cut you get on there, the shear. Isn't that pretty? And again, if you want to do another one, you could, push it down like this and give it another. That's it. I mean, is that not the coolest tool ever? And here's the pin we just made. So you could see how easy you can make pins like this. But now if you got music wire, which is really strong, how do you cut that? The best way I found to cut music wire is to use the little wafer wheels for the Dremel. And this is where the Dremel comes in really handy. And what you do is you just would hold it against here and run your wafer wheel until it abrades away the material, and it will make your pin that way. Okay, here's the pin we just made, and this is the same pin I used on the other one. Total time of cut on this was about 15 seconds. This pin will never twist. You'll never be able to snap this pin. This is a hardened, super hardened steel, like a spring steel. You'll never be able to break that. So that's the pin you use if you have to, any kind of turning. Well, that's another good reason not to throw your old drill bits out. When drill bits get old and dull and you can't sharpen them anymore, you can always cut the base off and make some high tension pins. Okay, let's get on to our next subject. Next up, I'd like you to welcome 2 new additions to the family. These little guys were born last night. They're 1 day old, and these little pigeons are some of the most amazing birds in all of creation. It's amazing what they can do, and this is what they look like when they're just born. So these little guys will in 1 month, they'll be as big as their parents. Okay, our next project's going to be going to South Carolina, beautiful South Carolina. The Waddell family, Robert and Jessica, have 3 beautiful children. Abigail, who's 13, Isabel, who's 9, and little Nathan, who's 5 years old. And what they do, they watch YouTube and Netflix. They don't mess around with satellite or cable, because this way they can control what they're seeing, and that's why these kids are so well adjusted. Anyway, they do enjoy the videos. They watch the channel, and but Robert was looking for a perfect handle screwdriver, and there's a lot of woodworkers in South Carolina, and they scoff them up, so they're very hard to find over there. So he was wondering, he's trying to get one. I happen to have one, and I'll show you where I got it. Months ago, a good friend of the show by the name of Brian Payne from New Hampshire, he had sent in a bunch of tools. I was doing a bunch of plier restorations. I must have done like 3 in a row, and I think Brian was getting a little bit full of pliers. So he sent me a few tools to do, and we did one of them back then. But I got a couple more. But this was one he sent, and this is a beautiful, really nice example of a perfect handle screwdriver, and it's very tight. It don't need a lot of work, but this is something you might find in this kind of condition. So let's do this up for the Waddell family. Okay, so the first thing Excuse me. Okay, so now the first thing we're going to do, we went over with the wire brush, and you could see it looks really nice. It's no damage at all. This is made by Irwin, this one. So as we know, we did the perfect handle history on the other one. So this is a perfect handle was made by the HD Smith company. But this one here is Irwin. You can see here the markings, Irwin USA. So now what we're going to do is we got to get the paint and everything off this handle. So what I always like to do, the best way, is the old razor blade. Putting it in your hand here and just scraping down with the grain. And eventually you'll get off all the, you'll see here, you can see how quickly that works. So we'll do the whole screwdriver. Yeah, you can see here we only did a couple minutes of scraping. You can see the scrapings we got off what it looks like. You see that that's all varnish and patina. We scraped it all off. Look how nice it looks. Huh? Now we're going to hit it with a little sanding. We're going to sand to make sure this is nice, get rid of the staining in there, and then we'll go to a finish. Now here we are with our sanded down. Everything's all sanded down and lovely, you know, hand sanded. Everything's polished out, and the tip came out marvelous, you know, kept the exact same profile. And now what we're going to do is we're going to put some shellac on here. First, to color it back to the original color, I use amber shellac, and then we'll give it some regular shellac, and let's get into that.
Now you know my favorite part. Remember what this screwdriver looked like before we started.
And we're calling this project done. Look how nice this came out, huh? Now that's 3 coats of amber shellac, 1 coat of clear shellac, and then of course we polished everything out here. And look how nice the back cap looks, huh? But it's a nice little screwdriver, and I believe that all the way from Bryan in New Hampshire. Now we'll be with Robert in South Carolina and his family. So I think this came out nice. I think he'll enjoy it, and I'll have it out in the mail now.
Now, if you were wondering what that flower was, that is the flower for a boxwood, a common hedge. Now, a lot of times you don't see them because hedges usually trimmed down and cut like this, but if you let them grow wild, like I have in my backyard, they can grow up to 20 feet tall, and they have the most beautiful aroma, and they attract all kinds of wonderful insects. So,
next up,
boxwood
the
hedge.
results are in. Thank you so much for responding to my question on how long you like the videos. And the majority of you said between 10 and 15 minutes, depending on the subject material. So we registered that, and we'll be doing. It's funny because there was only a couple people like me that like short-term videos, I guess, short-term attention spans, but the majority was between 10 and 15. So thank you so much for that. There's one other thing I can use your help for, and this really bugged me. You know, I was very happy with the Vice video, and you were too, and I really appreciate your feedback on that. But I upload everything in 1080. You know, the highest resolution I can, because, you know, nobody wants to watch a video in potato vision, you know, 360p. And that video, usually it used to take like an hour or two, and it would kick over to HD. It took 10, 12 hours, and it was still in 360. It drove me nuts. I was so upset because most of you saw that video in a bad resolution. So my question to you is, what do you do? I was looking up everything to try and figure out. I'm kind of computer illiterate, as you could tell, but they were telling me that if you maybe download it unregistered, unlisted, if I download the video unlisted, let it process, and then list it. So I'm going to try that with this video and see how that works. But then some of you might not get the notifications. So let me know if you get the notifications on this video. And thanks so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I hope you all have a nice day. Take care.